SFX, soft_bell, 0. What if Socrates was wrong about wisdom itself? The man who makes us doubt everything may have made a different kind of mistake that echoes down the centuries. In a world that prizes certainty, Socrates keeps whispering a single question. Do you know what you think you know? He turned doubt into a method, and that method became a mirror. But mirrors can distort what they reflect. The surprising thing is not that Socrates was a genius, but that 5 aspects of his approach hide a quiet misstep, a set of blind spots that still shape our thinking today. Mistake 1 is the certainty of ignorance. Socrates wore his ignorance like a badge, as if saying, "I know nothing proves I know the most." But choosing ignorance as a virtue can become a trap. When doubt is worshipped above all, it can stall action, paralyze choices, and leave problems unfixed while we chase the perfect question. The aim, after all, is not to wallow in uncertainty, but to turn inquiry into Mistake 2 is the elenchus, the relentless cross-examination that reduces every answer to a further question. In theory, questions illuminate. In practice, they can become a performance of wit, a duel in which the victory is the shape of the interlocutor's defensiveness. When dialogue becomes competition, the human bond loosens. You end up with a thinker who courts disagreement as sport, instead of a conversation that invites honesty. The risk is not merely embarrassment, but the loss of warmth, empathy, and the shared courage to grow together. SFX, paper_Russell 1. 2. Mistake 3 is the chase for definitions. Socrates insisted that virtue, justice, piety, these are precisely defined. But language is slippery, living, and wired to context. In the hunt for pure forms, we miss the texture of real life, the nuances of a neighborhood, the friction of a culture, the messy ethics of a waking day. Definitions can be ladders that lift us up, but when we cling too tightly, they become cages that trap moral imagination. The truth, perhaps, lies not in removing ambiguity, but in learning to navigate it with humility. SFX, soft_symbols, 1. Mistake 4 is the separation of ethics from politics. Socrates spoke of virtue as an inward discipline, a lighthouse in the soul. Yet a republic is not a private study. It is a shared burden. If we treat virtue as a private achievement, we neglect institutions, power, and the consequences of choice in the public sphere. The philosopher who remains a solitary sage may forget that moral life unfolds inside communities, and communities' failures or triumphs. Wisdom without political sensitivity becomes a quiet resignation to injustice, a refusal to shape the world where people actually live. SFX, wind understanding for hollows, 1. 3. Mistake 5 is the neglect of emotion and body. Socrates elevated rational assent, the ascent of the soul, above the body's urges and the heart's tremor. But a life that ignores feeling and habit is a map without roads. Reason is powerful, yet it travels best alongside memory, ritual, and the pain and joy that bodies experience. To treat ethics as pure calculation alone is to risk turning virtue into a sterile procedure rather than a lived art. The good life, perhaps, is a harmony of mind, heart, and action working together in time. SFX, water_glass, 0. 9. Here is the twist. These 5 so-called mistakes are not merely errors to be corrected. They reveal a deeper truth about philosophy itself. Socrates did not intend to trap us in infinite questioning. He intended to free us from the dogmatic confidence that blocks growth. He challenged us to test our beliefs by exposure to scrutiny. But the test, if carried too far, can dull the senses, turning wisdom into perpetual skepticism rather than actionable wisdom. So what if the value of Socrates lies not in delivering a flawless template for living, but in forcing us to confront the tension between doubt and commitment? The difference between a life well-examined and a life indecisively postponed is the choice to act with integrity. Even when the ground is imperfect, the method demands a balance. Question boldly, listen deeply, and then choose with courage, aware that every choice reshapes the questions we will face tomorrow. SFX, soft_chime, 1. 2. If you take these 5 perspectives seriously, philosophy is less a set of perfect answers and more a disciplined practice of careful living. It asks us to scrutinize not only our beliefs, but our habits of mind, to notice when doubt becomes paralysis, and when certainty freezes our capacity to respond to others. The Socratic habit can be a compass, not a weapon, a way to illuminate the path forward without erasing the humanity of those who walk it with us. The real takeaway is not to hollow out Socrates into a few neat points, but to reframe how we engage with his method. Let inquiry be rigorous, but let it be humane. Let definitions guide us, but let us treat the living world with a tenderness that definitions alone cannot capture. Let skepticism sharpen our thinking, but let empathy sharpen our ethics. If we balance these tensions, we turn a classical paradox into a modern practice. That wisdom flourishes not by defeating doubt, but by inviting it to accompany us through the choices that shape our lives, despite the flaws we've uncovered. Socrates remains a mentor who compels us to test our beliefs, not to escape them. He teaches that thinking is a form of courage, and courage is a social act as much as an inner discipline. The 5 hidden mistakes once exposed can become 5 ground rails for a wiser routine. Ask with care, listen with patience, argue with generosity, define with humility, decide with responsibility. In that synthesis, philosophy becomes not a fortress of doubt, but a workshop where minds meet to forge character. So as you move through your day, carry this counterintuitive sense. Wisdom is not a final destination, but a living practice that evolves with us. Socrates did not hand us a map. He handed us a tool. The way we use it may reveal more about ourselves than about any answer we seek. Are you ready to question, to pause, to act, and in that act, to become more than you were yesterday? SFX, soft_bell 2, 0. 8. If the question is a doorway, maybe the mistake was thinking doors must stay shut to be safe. Open it anyway, and walk forward with eyes open and heart awake. The conversation continues, and with it, the chance to become a little truer to what we could become. That possibility begins with small acts that keep doubt human and doubt productive. The 5 missteps aren't T-skeletons to fear. They're tools you can reset into daily practice. Imagine a rhythm you can keep for weeks, not a lab experiment that burns out your patience. First, let doubt be a compass, not a trap. Before you rush to conclusions, name the fear that underpins your stance. Is certainty shielding a wound you don't want to face? If you can name the fear, you can treat it with care rather than with bravado. SFX, soft_wind, 1. 2. Second, let the elenchus become a neighborly conversation rather than a duel. When someone challenges your view, listen for the grain of truth beneath the clash. If you can respond with questions that steer toward clarity instead of wit that wounds, you transform the exchange into shared growth. Third, soften the chase for pure definitions by testing them against real life. Take a concept like courage and map it to a moment you faced fear, a person you helped, a decision that mattered. The definitions aren't cages. They're signposts that point to lived virtue in messy terrain. SFX, heartbeat_soft, 1. 4. Fourth, bridge ethics to public life without dissolving inner discipline. Virtue must breathe where power is exercised, when policy or justice is at stake. The inward virtues become outwards, courage translated into restraint, honesty into transparency, fairness into accountability. Let philosophy ride shotgun on governance, not whisper in a study alone. Fifth, invite the body and emotion back into the scaffold of reasoning. Reason without resonance is a lone lighthouse. When memory, ritual, and habit accompany thought, choices feel less like cold calculations and more like a coherent story you are willing to live by. The good life thrives at the intersection of mind, body, and feeling. SFX, water_drop, 0. 9 here as the turning point. You don't have to abandon doubt to act. You don't have to pretend certainty is a shield. You can hold doubt with a steady hand and let action follow as a moral instrument. In practice, that means a daily cadence. Question, listen, test, decide, reflect, repeat. Not as a rigid ritual, but as a humane discipline that grows with you. SFX, soft_chime, 1. 2. The beauty of this reframing is that it releases Socrates from the pedestal and returns him to a living craft. He wanted us to test beliefs, yes, but to do so in a way that preserves human connection. If you keep that balance, philosophy stops being a museum piece and becomes a workshop where you shape character under pressure with others at your side. SFX, doorunderstreping 1. So the 5 hidden mistakes become 5 rails along a road you actually walk. They don't demand perfection. They invite responsibility. They don't offer a final blueprint. They offer a flexible map you can redraw as you travel. And as you walk, you may notice a deeper resonance. Wisdom isn't a trophy you win. It's a way of being with others. A practice that quietly refines how you choose when you're unsure. If you carry this into your next conversation, your next decision, your next morning, the old paradox starts to feel coherent again. Doubt remains, but no longer halts you. It becomes the fuel for wiser action. The check that keeps you honest. The invitation to grow without losing your humanity. The question that once chained you to hesitation can become the doorway that invites you into a more deliberate, gentler courage. SFX, soft_bell, 0. 9. As you move through the day, test this balance. Let skepticism stand guard. Let empathy guide your replies. Let curiosity fuel your commitments. The method isn't a weapon. It's a compass you can trust when the weather of life grows sharp. The 5 hidden mistakes, fully understood, become 5 quiet allies. Caution without paralysis, inquiry without cruelty, clarity without rigidity. That is the Socratic edge rewritten for a world that still aches for wisdom, still longs for a conversation that matters. SFX, soft_bell 2, 0. 8. If a door swung shut on certainty, you've learned to turn the hinge. You step through, not with certainty, but with responsibility, and decide with a conscience awake to the consequences. The dialogue continues, and with it, the chance to become truer to what you could become.